Welcome to the Church of Mabus radio show. It's Friday night, 7:03 p.m. Central. You're listening to 9 at Public Radio, 107.7 FM New Orleans. And I'm in Florida. And man, the heat's starting to friggin' get up going. I don't like it. I got to get out of here. At least we get winter when it's hot, for sure. I mean, when it's cold, we actually get winter. So that's good. And Mark, hold on just a second, Mark.
Okay, so am I supposed to fill dead air with singing?
Yes, sorry.
Run on or something like that?
I
wasn't planning on that. But
a weird dog situation that broke out. Complete pandemonium as usual. But anywho, it's better now. And we have a Boston Terrier that I think he's possessed, quite frankly, when it comes to the way he's behaving. But anyway, I'm grateful to talk about Elvis. Grew up as a kid listening to Elvis, but as I got older, I had more of a fondness for it. I found myself listening to it a whole lot more on many levels. But so, Mark, if you want to begin with your questions, and then we'll get back to me.
Sure. Miguel, we've spoken about, your research into Gnosticism. You and Rob Sullivan, talk a lot, and I've had him as a guest numerous times. Even Rob writes about Elvis. There's something that, in the nearly 50 years since his passing, that generations still latch onto his legacy. Maybe it's I did not know this until I read your book, and most of tonight's show is going to be discussing the Occult Elvis. You wrote that In the Ghetto and If I Can Dream are about the only two songs that Elvis wrote. I mean, those are.
No, he didn't write them. Only two social songs.
Oh, so social songs. And those are about two of the most powerful songs that are out there, and just really there's timeless messages, and Elvis's influence really hasn't wavered since the unfortunate day in August of 1977. But maybe to set up some of the topics that I know Jeffrey wants to get into, and it features into Wham's research. Let's just start at Elvis's birth and the paranormal things that are going on during that cold night in Mississippi. You got this blue light. I'm going to start with that and go take the topic forward.
Yeah, as I write in the book, it was almost fated that Elvis would be Elvis. I think that everything was set up as both the rock star and the spiritual seeker that he was. And yeah, we can start with that one. January 8th, when he was born, they lived obviously in abject poverty in the middle of the Great Depression, Tupelo, Mississippi, 1935. So they couldn't, the Presleys, Vernon and Gladys, couldn't even afford a doctor or a midwife or a hospital. So they had to have this child in this little house with no indoor plumbing or bathroom. And it was a difficult birth. At one point, Vernon went outside to have a cigarette, and a blue light appeared over the house. Whether this light was some UFO craft or some heralding star, like happens with great figures like Jesus or Alexander the Great or even Buddha and so forth, I leave that up to the reader. But this blue light hovered over the house. It swallowed all sound. The wind seemed to stop, and Vernon freaked out. Needless to say, he dropped his cigarette and ran inside. Now, he didn't have time to relate to it because Elvis's older brother was born. His name was Jesse, but he came out stillborn. And then 35 minutes later, Elvis came out. And this would really affect Elvis for the rest of his life, because this is what you call the twinless survivor syndrome. And I try to compare Elvis to other twinless survivors. It's certainly a psychological disorder. You might call it survivor's guilt. The individual feels that they have lost something that is part of them. They are seeking because they don't understand. Elvis would always be trying to understand the larger questions of life, like, why did I survive and why did Jesse die? We had the same birth, 35 minutes apart. Why was I born so poor where we couldn't afford good doctor care and so forth? And later on, why did I become so rich and powerful, and what am I supposed to do with that? So twinless survivors are seekers. However, they tend to be a little off balance. They tend to be workaholics, self-destructive, addiction prone, and have difficulties connecting to other people, especially the opposite sex. So it seems like that was set. And again, I compared in the book to other twinless survivors like Philip K. Dick or Liberace, who had the same sort of trajectory in life and eventual self-destruction, especially Philip K. Dick. So it seems to be fated. There is an apocryphal story that while Gladys was giving birth, they had two dolls on a shelf. And during the birth, one of the dolls fell to the ground and broke as if an omen. So these things were already set for Elvis to be Elvis. And of course, being born in abject poverty really shaped Elvis and further traumatized him, because they lived a very harsh life until they were able to move to Memphis 13 years later. So these are some of the omens and effects that would turn Elvis into Elvis, as I argue in the book.
And it's I was just going to say the Philip K. Dick connection is very interesting, and I apologize for earlier. It's been some weird energy, and we have a dog that's apparently deciding to turn into a werewolf and acting very out of sorts. I know we spoke to Wham recently, and that she works with a lot of children, and we're talking about just weird energy in the air lately with everything that's going on, which we don't have to get into that right now, God knows, but we're doing Elvis. But the main reason we're here is because I'm an experiencer, and we've been doing the show for 18 years, and I started out interviewing some people like Stanton Friedman and Jim Mars and big people in the UFO field. And a lot of my experiences were after testicular cancer at 17 and my father's death. And that led to us doing the show. That's why I find the Elvis stuff so fascinating. And definitely Philip K. Dick. That's awesome too, for sure. So definitely anything you can share about any of that is I'm all ears.
What do you want me to share about? I'm sorry.
Philip K. Dick.
Well, Philip K. Dick, I tried to show parallels to Elvis. So to give the audience more context and to give them more clarity, because both individuals, and this was a surprise when I was researching the book, had parallel lives. And most people would say, well, why would a famous rock star who seemingly was a conservative Christian and this sort of sci-fi writer who called himself a beatnik from California, a Berkeley beatnik, have any parallels? But they did. And a lot of these parallels is to show like a generational, some of their generational connections, because most people know about the boomers and the greatest generation, but they always forget about the silent generation, just like people forget about my generation, Generation X, because we're the quiet, cynical, but rebellious generation. And that was kind of the silent generation. They came out of, they grew up in the Great Depression. They had parents during World War II, and they came out to a different world after the Second World War. And they believed in the system, but they had no problem rebelling or pushing back against him. I mean, Elvis certainly was the most controversial figure. When he came out, he was transgressive. And then other individuals like Bob Dylan, Martin Luther King Jr., and others were from that generation. So it shows the similarities, and the similarities of Elvis and Philip K. Dick are just incredible. Again, both lost their twins at birth, and it really shaped their lives. Most people don't know that everything Philip K. Dick wrote about was a search of an answer for the death of his sister Jane, just like most people don't know that everything that drove Elvis was the loss of his brother Jesse. And both became sort of daemons or higher selves or parts of their consciousness that would guide them in their dreams, as gut feelings, as voices in their head. And these twins were really the cornerstone of both their music and Philip K. Dick's transformational sci-fi that really changed history with, movies based like Blade Runner and Total Recall, Man in the High Castle. But suddenly I saw a lot of similarities. For example, both had abusive mothers. Both had sort of beta fathers, wallflower fathers. Both started taking amphetamines because it helped them work harder. But unfortunately, it got the best of them, and then eventually both would go into a lot of drug rabbit holes that did a lot of damage. Again, both had problems making connections with women, a lot of relationships. Philip K. Dick had a lot of marriages. Both had certainly mystical experiences, were very eclectic in their religious pursuits. They both were, although maybe not educated, they were highly self educated, who read a lot of different books in occultism, mysticism, Eastern tradition, and sort of mixed them together, and they kind of created their own systems. Both were meditators, again, who had mystic experience. Both had UFO encounters. Philip K. Dick had, Elvis had 3, maybe 4. Elvis had a couple. Both had mystic experiences and so forth. And both, again, died young because of the damage they did with their workaholism and their so-called perennial abuse of drugs. So there's a lot of parallels, and it's really, it's very striking how two different people had the same almost fated journey in their lives.
Miguel, as you know, you're getting us started with very intriguing background material and similarity. I'm sure most of the audience really wasn't planning on learning a little bit about Liberace tonight, but it fits. But you make interesting points, and another topic that you introduce runs throughout the book is Gladys's upbringing in the Pentecostal church. We can't ignore that influence when we try to understand who Elvis became. Can you tell us a little bit about that church's influence on Elvis?
Sure. It was definitely essential. Gladys and Vernon and many people in those days were part of the Pentecostal movement. They went to the Assembly of God. And in fact, Gladys would go, Elvis was born with certain mystic abilities, astral travel, premonition, psychic abilities, and he got that from Gladys. She had it too. We don't know what lineage it is or anything like that, but she would see dark things at night. She was able to heal and so forth. And she had certainly premonitions that something bad was going to happen when she gave birth. So she started going to the Pentecostal church, and you can imagine in those days, the Pentecostal church, as many people said, from other Christian religions, was mixing Jesus and sex together, because you'd go there, you let the Holy Spirit grab you, and you start shaking your body and going nuts. In fact, whenever you would shake your bodies and grip by the Holy Spirit and dance on the aisle, the term in the 40s was rock and rolling. So you start to wonder where rock music came from, and that's one of the places, Pentecostalism. As scholars have noted, Pentecostalism has all the features and bells of whistles of the ancient mystery religions and shamanistic traditions, because despite its conservative attitude, it is about having an experience of God, the Holy Spirit, and letting this being flood you and often heal you. And this is something, again, that the ancient mystery religions and shamanistic tribals would undergo. So Elvis even talks about, yeah, I was probably there in the belly with Jesse for months, and we were dancing together. In fact, research shows that twins in the belly do dance, they do communicate, and that probably shaped Elvis. And indeed, Pentecostalism and gospel was a huge and underreported influence on rock music. When the first rock musicians came out, Johnny Cash, Jerry Lee Lewis, Little Richard, and Elvis, a lot of music writers were like, this is just a holy revival tent show, except they've got electric guitars and they've switched, Jesus for Baby and all that, but it had all the trappings of a Pentecostal show. Of course, Elvis and others would infuse the devilish blues, creating this sort of light and darkness religion. But as I argue in the book, rock music was meant to be a sort of sound vibrational spiritual modality to help people cope with this brave new world that was the post-war American world with Eisenhower America and communists and UFOs and nuclear bombs and mass media. So Pentecostalism was certainly important in that, certainly taught Elvis, it helped him with his mystic powers, and really taught him that the way to do religion is to experience God and not just read about him.
Definitely interesting for sure. What I know you brought up shamanism and like bands with the Doors and Jim Morrison, and you can see that embodied on stage, and you can certainly see it with Elvis. And we had Jimmy Blue on not too long ago about Jimi Hendrix, and it's just interesting that there seems to be certain musicians who embody that more maybe than others. I don't want to be callous and insult anyone, but it seems like there's definitely some power ones out there that embody that more than others. What can you tell us about the shamanism and Elvis embodying that?
Well, yeah, in the book I call him America's shaman, and he was America's shaman. Who's the shaman? The spiritual troubleshooter of the tribe. What's one of the characteristics of the shaman? Dressing up in a lot of music and taking care of both genders, taking care of the spiritual, physical, and mental well-being of the tribe. It's the individual that goes into the spirit world, and as I argue, that was Elvis. He went into the spirit world and he went to the crossroads, as I talk about, the place where only Robert Johnson had been, and he brought these heavenly forces of gospel, these angelic forces, and he mixed them up with the spiritual darkness of the devil as found in the blues, which is also taps into African animism, and he brought it together for this healing and spiritual modality that we call rock music. And again, the theatrics, the movement, the music, the way the tribe acted around him, the way women lost their minds and people just felt one with Elvis. The world had never seen an act or a musician like that in all of their history. I mean, he was just psychic and mind bending and often reality bending. And he certainly was a shaman by all the definitions. In the book, I compare all the definitions. And the one that is important is the wounded healer concept. One characteristic you find about shamans all over the world is that they are broken. They've been broken as children. Because they are broken by some trauma, whether it's an NDE or an accident or a handicap, their channels of communication are open into the world. Plus, they find a way, their pain allows them to connect with others who are in pain and can heal them. And in fact, the wounded healer heals others not despite their trauma, but because of their trauma. They can connect. They have an understanding of self-sacrifice and how important it is to help others who are hurting. And they often feel that if I heal myself, I will lose the power to heal others. And in some tribes, indeed, the shaman does end up being a drug addict and a broken down person because you're dealing with the spiritual, the very soul of your tribe. You're negotiating the spirit world, and you are already broken, healing others. So, any way you look at it, Elvis is a shaman, and we've all experienced it. We all been to rock concerts, and you can feel this individual is more of a high priest or a ancient psychopomp, a shaman. This individual connects with us, and this individual knows us, and this individual knows our pain and can heal us as we're together with the audience and we create an egregore and all that. So Elvis really was the starting point of this sort of shamanism, modern shamanism. And yeah, you mentioned Jim Morrison, of course. Well, guess who was one of his idols? Elvis. He patented his singing style after Elvis and the crooners too. But you see those so many other, whether it's Kurt Cobain, David Bowie, the Grateful Dead. We can go down the list, but the genesis of this sort of shamanism, modern techno American shamanism, is and will always be Elvis.
Yeah. Again, what I just wanted to read a brief passage that from your Occult Elvis that corresponds with what you were just discussing. And you wrote the animal totems, potions, and drums were replaced by church altars, faith healing, and pianos. Later, electric guitars. Yet Pentecostals employed the same oral formulaic technique that could send a crowd into a trance and provide possible healing.
That's it. Yeah.
Yep.
And again,
So,
this is scholars, anthropologists,
yeah,
they're the ones who've noticed it.
yeah, and Marcia Eliad's shamanism book. You quote her.
Mircea Eliade.
Yeah, him.
Okay. Oh, him.
It's a him.
Okay. I'm sorry. I screwed that up. But I've read that too, and it's a very powerful book about the long traditions of shamans, having hereditary position, they earned the position, or they just inherited. It's what they did for the community. It's actually a fantastic book.
And when it comes to shamanism, and we were talking about different bands with different personalities and stuff. Some of the ones that came to mind for me that I really enjoy is usually a unique voice, like Typo Negative. His voice is like, that was like Dracula singing metal songs pretty much. And then Alice in Chains, that's a good one. And I love Nirvana and grew up with that. And just those, and Tool, things like that. Just nowadays, it's kind of hard to find. There's some you hear and you're like, oh God, it sounds like the other 10 bands that we've heard on the radio, with that unique voice where they tap into that. It's weird how Alice in Chains got a new guy, and I forget his name, but he sounds kind of like the old guy, but he has some different things to him, but it's kind of eerie when they do that. That's kind of like a weird little hint that something's going on strange when like AC/DC gets another dude that sounds like the same dude. It's like, are you channeling a ghost? What is happening? It's just strange. Like they're channeling that, they're tapping into something for sure. So that's definitely fascinating to think about on so many different levels. What are some of the influences you grew up? I know you said something about David Bowie and something in the future with him, but what are some of the big ones growing up that led into this book for you?
Well, honestly, I never was an Elvis fan. I was almost called by Elvis or channeled, or I got quantum entangled. Really didn't know much about Elvis until 2022 when this voice decided I needed to change direction. And but before that, I was always I guess Pink Floyd, the Beatles, the Doors, Nirvana, Stone Temple Pilots. Very eclectic. I mean, I got into moods where I want to listen to ABBA, and I don't care if anybody cared. You know, it really depends what I was going through in life, what my mood was during the day. Jane's Addiction, you name it, I enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's definitely Nirvana was a big one for me, for sure. And that was a strange situation when they lose their lives like that. I know I was looking at some things about the Doors movie. Apparently, there's a lot of things in it that weren't exactly accurate from Oliver Stone, which I don't know the details of that. But what are some of I never saw the Kurt Russell Elvis movie. Was that any good? And has there been a movie that you think embodies it? And that's kind of with me, Elvis. I would hear him as a kid and I was kind of like, Elvis, no big deal. But as I got older, I appreciated it more. Like I didn't really give a flip back then about Elvis, but now it's something, there's something else to it for sure.
Yeah, when you listen to Elvis, there's nothing like it. It's so unique and it is magical. Almost like the first time you listen to Jimi Hendrix, you go, oh my God, I've never heard anything like this, and nor will I ever hear. Or you listen to the riffs of Eddie Van Halen, you're like, this is awesome. It's new. It's never been done before. Elvis, I get this sense of newness every time I listen to this song. And again, he is tapping into spiritual forces. That's why he didn't care about writing songs. He was more of I'm going to make it my own, and I'm going to go deep into the essence of this song and try to bring out, again, this medicine, this sound vibrational therapy to the people that I love, which is the American citizens and people. But he loved all people and religion. So, yeah, I would certainly agree with that.
What about the recent Elvis movie? It was pretty good. I saw that one. I don't know how accurate it was, but it wasn't terrible. It won award stuff. But it did a pretty good job, I guess.
Yeah, I don't remember the Kurt Russell film.
There is one he plays
I remember seeing it as a child. My parents were watching it, but now I know. Of course, later you realize, who directed that movie? John Carpenter. That was the first time he and Russell started working together, became a relationship. And Kurt Russell actually appeared as a child in a movie with Elvis. So strange connections.
That is weird. Yeah. I never got to see it. I have it, and I never got around to it. I need to actually do it, which I'm sure it's interestingly weird for sure.
What movie was that?
I forget the name of it, but it's an Elvis movie where Kurt Russell is
I did not know
Elvis.
That.
Yeah.
Yeah. But Baz Luhrmann is good, but yeah, he definitely bends a lot of history, and he pretty much avoids any of Elvis's spiritual and occult and supernatural life. But it's a decent, and I think the actor, what's his name, Butler, I think he's probably the best Elvis I've ever seen, because the problem is most people try to put a macho, manly Elvis, but don't realize that part of Elvis's charm and how he broke ground was that he was androgynous. You know, he broke the template of the Gary Cooper kind of chiseled man, and cats like him and Marlon Brando and James Dean brought this softness, vulnerability, this androgyny. And this is what was very powerful because, you know, women felt attracted to that. They felt comfortable and they could open up and just go wild over these individuals, and men felt non-threatened. So a lot of these Elvis movies, the guy's a little too, again, too much on the macho scale. And I think, what's his name? Butler has that perfect balance of softness and male power.
Did you ever get to see Bubba Hotep with Bruce Campbell as Elvis?
Yeah. Again, most of these actors go too far. I mean, Val Kilmer in True Romance is great, but you don't see him. You just hear his voice when he's in the mirror. So he's a great Elvis just because his voice is awesome.
I love that movie, True Romance. I've seen it a bunch. That's a good one. That's a strange gem for sure.
Well, Quentin Tarantino, I mean, we have to, the more you look, the more you realize Elvis really is the foundation of our post-war American culture, because Quentin Tarantino, he got his start as an Elvis impersonator in Golden, what's the name? Golden Years or the Golden Ladies. I forget the name of the show.
Golden Girls?
Golden Girls, yes.
Okay.
And he was always an Elvis fanatic. That's what drove him. And you see that sort of influence. Even in Pulp Fiction, there's that great speech about Elvis people and Beatles people between Mia Wallace and Vincent Vega, John Travolta. And you see that. And David Lynch, too. David Lynch always said the greatest icon in our world is Elvis. And you see this sort of Elvis duality in his movies, the idyllic America, but then the dark transgressive powers that you see in Blue Velvet and others. And obviously Nicolas Cage, you know, perhaps the actor of our times. He's obsessed with Elvis. Everything he's doing is trying to catch up and capture the essence of Elvis.
Yeah, Miguel, as you know, you don't go into like a lot of detail about analyzing each song. You just kind of keep your book to the major, formative events, the legacy. But since we were, just recently discussing some of the Pentecostal upbringing, I'm sure we can, in just a minute, just kind of get into Elvis healing the children from the stage when the parents were bringing ill children to concerts. But I'm sure a lot of people tuning in tonight are very much aware of Jailhouse Rock, but you get the Gospel Elvis CD. That's that side of his singing is just really powerful. I'd encourage people to check out however they prefer to do that. But songs like "Run On" or "He Touched Me," those present a side of him that maybe is frequently overlooked, but his gospel material should not be, because that's probably more essential to understanding him than um, you know, "Love Me Tender." I don't know if there's a question in there, but I agree with what you are
Yeah.
what you argue is a very valid point, and I hope people will at least seek out some of those songs and hear the sincerity that uh, emanates from him.
Here, here.
Well, I think it speaks to, I think it speaks to the fact that, when he died, there are lots of people who claim that they have seen him, that they have had experiences of him, sort of, um, post death, that or that he never died to begin with. I mean,
What?
it's kind of interesting to me because I have thought about this. I mean, I guess I never. I'll be honest. I have never been like a huge Elvis fan, and that I think it's a generational thing more than anything else, because when I finally became aware of Elvis, it was really towards the end of his career. It wasn't, you know, I was a little, I was too young to really, I was not around when he was at his peak, basically. But I can certainly see, I certainly have been aware of how, especially music stars, musical celebrities, kind of attain a level of prominence in our culture that you really don't see other stars doing. I mean, you've got your sports stars and you've got your actors, who can be celebrities, but there seems to be a different quality to people who are music stars. And I think it is connected to a way in which those individuals, in whatever genre they're playing in, usually it's pop music or rock and roll or soul or something like that, but it's their ability to connect broadly to lots of different kinds of people. Um, and I can see where, if he was the first great superstar with this kind of shamanic ability, um, because I have certainly experienced that level of kind of spiritual experience with other celebrities, with other musical celebrities. Just like I said, Elvis was kind of before my time, before my awareness. But I know that people who are attached to him, were extremely attached. I mean, I can remember when he died, when, the report of his death occurred, and how there was this just kind of, it was, I can't even really describe it. It was kind of a real cultural reverberation that just kind of shook everybody. It was kind of like one of those demarcations. I mean, in my life, I can only think of a few other people, few other musical stars that have died, that have had even slightly the impact of that, like when John Lennon was assassinated, when Prince died, when Bowie died, similar kinds of, just a sense of kind of like a hollowing out of our culture, a hollowing out of a fixture, if you will. So I can certainly see why people would continue to dream about him, where he would appear to them in their sleep, where he would give messages to people. I mean, Elvis, and seeing Elvis in places has almost been like seeing Jesus in places. People have seen him, have had, visions of him in the same way that, like you'll see Jesus in toast or something. People have seen Elvis in the same way. It's really interesting to me. I'm not making fun of any of it. I think that it speaks to that spirituality that he connected to, that you've been talking about. I mean, I know in my own life there are celebrities, musical celebrities and I don't usually dream about famous people because I've known a lot of famous people in my life, so I know that they're just people, but I've had dreams about some individuals that have a certain spiritual resonance for me, and those things are significant. So I figure if I do that, well, then other people will do that, with other figures. But I think this is a feature of our culture, of our popular culture, kind of if you will, a kind of cultural spirituality, if you will.
Yep. I agree. He's America's shaman. He's part of our mythology. He represents the soul of America. And he's going to continue appearing. I mean, you can make fun of Bigfoot appearances, but there's a reason Sasquatch keeps appearing, because it tells something about us. It's a very important, or UFOs, or Jesus, or the Virgin Mary. It's a message, and it could be a projection of our collective unconscious, but it's alive, it's dynamic, and it's important. Whether it's Elvis, Bigfoot, Jesus, Virgin Mary, or UFOs, it's important.
Yeah, it says something. Something.
We got a guy coming on, Tribes of Bigfoot, Maxim Furrick, a real book on Bigfoot, Tribes of Bigfoot. I'm not sure exactly what that entails, but it's a weird subject for sure. But
it's looking at Yeti, Bigfoot, different species of bipedal humanoid creatures.
One thing I wanted to say is when I was going through chemotherapy at 17 for testicular cancer, and woke up from exploratory surgery to find out that they took one, and I just like cried when they told me that, I was going to shoot myself. And I heard the song from Nirvana, Lithium, and I didn't do it. It was like something there stopped me from doing it. Maybe I wasn't going to do it anyway, but I certainly went through the motions of like, screw this sucks. I'm checking out. You're going to take a meatball? Well, F you, But anyway, that song made me not do it. And it was like there was a force there that stopped me from doing it. So I wrote Nirvana, and I told them that. And of course, I never heard anything back. I don't know if they read it. But then he shot himself. I was like, man. And then I heard Pisces Web. I was like, man, that's a weird one. That's kind of reminds me of the situation. But that was the first band, I think, that was something like the Power players, and then the Doors came later and stuff like that. But that was definitely one that stopped me a little and slapped me around. Nirvana.
Allegedly shot himself.
Yeah. Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me either, for sure. Wouldn't surprise me at all. But definitely, what are some bands now that you really dig? I'm curious to your musical taste. Mine are weird. It can get to that Voltaire guy that's kind of like a Faustian weird music, to R. Carlos Naki. Hopefully I said that correctly. Nakai, a Native American guy. There's one guy, what's his name? Israel, that was doing the Somewhere Over the Rainbow. It's like a Hawaiian dude that passed away. Like to find some of those shamanic ones. That Israel guy is like a big dude in Hawaii that sung, and I think he passed away not too long ago. But what are some of the ones that do it for you now? Just from now, what's out? Nothing. It's like rock and roll's dead, doesn't it? When you watch those award shows, I can't even watch them. It's like there's no rock and roll even there, hardly at all. I don't think there is. Like there's nothing.
Yeah, there's a singer called Melanie Martinez that my daughter likes. She's really good because she's really dark. She goes to some strange places in her songs, but she also writes very smart lyrics about shadow and alchemy and all that. So I know she's dipping into these esoteric texts. But outside of that, and also too, I mean, when I wrote Elvis, I had to listen to Elvis the whole time, and now I've been listening to a lot of Bowie. So just working, gotta work.
Miguel, Wayne was just discussing some of the cultural influences on Elvis and other artists. You also place a lot of emphasis on Elvis growing up during the golden age of comics. The TV had already been invented, but just a short time later, you get the appearance of the jukebox. So it just seems like he was just born at this time when this new technology, the new technology is changing things, and then there's Elvis, and shortly thereafter, put your nickel in the jukebox machine and hear "That's All Right," and becomes number one hit, and the rest is history. So, how did some of the comic book and the inventions in the early late 40s, early 50s help to create the person that we're talking about today?
It's almost like he was an expression, or he took advantage of it. Sometimes it's hard to tell.
Yeah,
You
that's a
become
good point.
something, or you're behind something, or you're an expression of something. But as I called him, he's the Lord of the Crossroads, which is, a name for Hermes or the devil or other trickster figures, because people don't understand how much America changed after World War II. In fact, you can look at all the you look at some of the what do you call it, the waves, the charts of how civilization grows and technology, and humanity is going like that, and then come the Sumerians and we shoot up. Thousands of years we're putting away, adding a few things, and then suddenly in 1948, around that time, the curve shoots up like it's never before. All of a sudden we have satellites and transistor radios and nuclear bombs, and just, I mean, and it's all plateaued after the end of the 20th century. And like, what happened? How did we, especially as a country, just shoot up like history? And it defies all sort of logic. And use whatever theories you can. Was it Nazi technology, UFOs? I give different possibilities, and I'll let the audience decide. But suddenly we went from this sort of semi-benign republic to this mighty empire that history had never seen, and technology was at our fingertips. And you've got Elvis right there, who just exploits this. I mean, people had whiplash because he knew how to manipulate TV. He knew how to like I said, the jukebox, the radio. He was in movies, and he was always innovating, even from his Hawaii special, using satellite and all that. He was always ahead of the curve. But we also change in all sort of ways too. We went from a society that had a normal standard of music to suddenly a society that wanted to explore alternative music like Black or Hispanic. We went from a society that had traditional religions, and Elvis comes, and suddenly it's cool to start eventually searching for other forms of alternative spirituality, looking at the East, looking at Theosophy. We had a traditional society, and suddenly Elvis comes, and women are suddenly sexually liberated, and men are allowed to be sensitive and go inward. So the sex of the gender relationships would change forever. And you go with Elvis, and he's at the crossroads in this complete change of history, this pivot that no nation had ever seen in 100,000 years of human history. The transformative power, whether Elvis was behind it or an expression, what happened in America was just, it's still mind-boggling how it could happen, how we change as a culture. And he was always there. Yeah, he was there. Like I said, he was the Lord of the Crossroads, and comic books is one of those. Comic books used to be as transgressive as rock music and other forms. It was only for the people on the edges of town. And Elvis was one of the people on the edges of town living in poverty who got into Captain Marvel, or as we know him today, Shazam, who's a very magical being. He's a wizard, gives him this power. And Shazam is the name of all these famous magical people like Solomon and Hercules and Zeus and all that. And Elvis takes this power and always talks about how much Captain Marvel helped his career, gave him hope that if this poor kid could transform in a superhero, perhaps he could too. So Elvis, popular, you could say, he seeded the idea of comic books going so bad. And we can't forget martial arts. He got a black belt when he was in the army in the late 50s. He was only one of 100 black belts in America in a country of 176 million. That's niche. That is unknown. But Elvis always enjoyed martial arts, mainly because he was always being attacked by jealous boyfriends and husbands. But he kept getting black belts. And later in the 60s, he demythologized or demystified the idea of martial arts. He would do it in his concerts. He opened up his own dojos. And he basically opened the doors for people like Bruce Lee and Chuck Norris. So we just can't minimize how influential Elvis was in changing our culture in so many ways.
What do we know about his natal chart? He was a Capricorn, right? And what else do we know about that? I know David Bowie was too. And that's what I am. It's definitely a weird one for sure. The Saturn connection, especially. But what do we know about his chart?
I don't know much. I do include a chart. I had my friend Maja Daoud do it. I'll leave it to astrologers because astrology is not my thing.
It's in the book, and
not my thing. Yeah,
it's not mine really. Briefly, like maybe a little, but not. I'm definitely not an expert. It's too much for me to keep up with for sure. But so what were some of your other books before this? Was this your first book, or you had some other stuff before this?
I'd written a few niche books, a couple of niche books on Gnosticism, a few science fiction ones, but this came out of nowhere. Again, it was one summer, a series of, visions, synchronicities, urges told me I needed to look at Elvis, and this voice kept telling me, there's part of my story you've missed. And all of a sudden, I became enthralled with Elvis. And I just started writing this book, and it took 3 months. And the purpose was to show the world a part of Elvis that nobody really ever knew about it. It's a best kept secret, or it's a secret out in the open, because all of Elvis's UFO encounters and magic abilities and interest in the occult and all that, it's all right there in all the bios. People have written books about him like his spiritual leaders, but for some reason most of the world didn't want to see that. I guess perhaps they wanted to hold on to this idea of Elvis being this conservative Christian good old boy, when in doubt he was a very sophisticated mystic and thinker, and an individual who had incredible experiences beyond being a famous rock star.
Okay, you guys, I have looked up his chart. And if you want to know what his chart says, that kind of correlates with what you guys have been talking about, I can tell you this. Would you like to know that?
Yeah,
Sure.
Sure.
Okay.
Maybe I can take a break while you talk.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go
Astrology is not my thing. Yeah. I'm an I Ching kind of guy. And my wife does the tarot for me, so I don't deal with it.
He told us he was going to take a break earlier. So
no, that's cool. That's cool.
Yeah. Talk. I'll be back in about 5-10 minutes. Thanks.
So he does have his sun in Capricorn, but he also has his Mercury and his Venus in Capricorn, and these are in the second house, which is interesting, given because what that usually means. I mean, when we think of Elvis, you know, we think of him. Most people, I think of him as a celebrity. And we think of celebrities as being sort of laid back and easy and stuff like that. With this placement in the second house, it's kind of like a conjunction in the second house in Capricorn. This indicates that, in fact, he was very ambitious about what he did, and thought a lot about what he did. He considered things deeply, and he also did not really talk about that much about what was truly important to him. He would sort of keep that stuff under wraps, so that when he did say something about what was really important to him or his ambitions, it actually was really, really important. And he was very directed. It also, with Venus in Capricorn, this also indicates that even though he was not successful in love in a lot of ways, the fact is that when he didn't love easily, and when he did love, he really did love deeply. It's also, but this entire Capricorn complex is opposed by Pluto in the 8th house in Cancer, and this is probably the source of a lot of his woundedness and his secrecy. It also would indicate an interest in occult things, an interest in knowing sort of the deeper secrets in life. But it's going to make it difficult for that person to be able to really disclose fully who they are. So in some ways, he probably is going to express a lot of himself through his ascendant. His rising sign is in Sagittarius, and that's where the performance part of him is going to come into play. His charisma, you know, all of that light and darkness kind of being channeled into Sagittarius in particular, is a sign that when it's placed in certain areas, a person can be a really good mirror for other people, or that person can sort of channel the zeitgeist, if you will, of a time or of a place or of a nation. That's part of the reason. That's part of where Trump, for example, gets some of his bizarre charisma. He has a very strong moon in Sagittarius, and that's not the best placement. Usually moon in Sagittarius is one of those placements where a person is more fanatical, you know, kind of nuts, you know, but there's still that charisma aspect of it. And so for Elvis, having a Sagittarius ascendant would be really excellent for a performer. It would be a person who would be able to perform a lot, be very flexible, perform in lots of different genres, and be able to reach across different boundaries, kind of a groundbreaker, if you will, which is what he was. The dark side of this, however, is that he's got a Saturn moon conjunction, and it's what's called a cross conjunction, in that the two signs are close together, but the Saturn is in Aquarius, and Saturn is one of the rulers of Aquarius, which is going to make that very, very strong. And then the moon is in Pisces. And when you have a conjunction in two different signs, what it does is it complicates that conjunction. It can sometimes make it difficult for the two planets to really find common accord with each other. Having a Pluto, having a Pisces moon. This is really a sign of deep spirituality, of connecting to unconscious forces. But since it's so close to Saturn in Aquarius, that can be interfered with in various ways, particularly because that Saturn is squared to a Jupiter in Scorpio in the 12th house. And what that's going to do is accentuate the Pisces moon. And this is one of the signatures of someone who has addictive problems, someone who might develop obsessive problems, and kind of get lost in their own dreams, in their own sensations, in their own desires. So,
I got it all.
huh?
Said I got it all. I'm sure. All of it.
It certainly is describing what has been. It's describing what has been described, how Elvis has been described this evening. The other part of this is
Transformer.
yeah, he's very definitely a transformer. And then on top of this, he has his Neptune in Virgo, and that Neptune in Virgo is trine to all that stuff. And that Virgo is that's in the 10th house. That's pretty good. Well, no, that's in the 9th house. It's close to his midheaven, and that's trine all of that Capricorn. So that again kind of plugs him into the larger dreams of his generation. You might say the unconscious, if you will, of his generation. And when he was able to do that, then he could pull on the more positive aspects of that moon in Pisces, since Pisces is ruled by Neptune. But when he got caught up in other things, because the other part of Capricorn, Capricorn is a very hard worker, is very ambitious, but Capricorn can also get caught up in some of the more material aspects of that and can confuse success, like material success with actual personal success, like interior success. And that's a failing that Capricorn has, that Capricorn doesn't always see. And in this instance, because of the placement of Saturn squared to that Jupiter in Scorpio in the 12th house, insofar as and in those ways in which Elvis was taken up by the material aspects of his success, to the degree that he would be sort of distracted by that, that's exactly to the degree that he would fall into addiction and compulsion. So he was pulled back and forth in that way.
The Capricorn sign interests me a lot, and I've studied it a lot because it's my sign, and I know he was one, and Bowie, and I think Anthony Hopkins is, and Marilyn Manson and Rob Zombie. It certainly can get weird, and I know that personally. And I wonder how much the UFO component plays into that on any level. Is Saturn sending back drones to us or something like that?
Well, I think it all depends on what we think UFOs are. I don't necessarily think they're any one thing. But I like, even though I haven't read this particular biography, this particular book, I have been aware for a long time, as I indicated, that Elvis is one of several musical celebrities who have been drawn into the more esoteric arts or the more esoteric parts of life. And so it wouldn't surprise me. I mean, given his Pisces moon, given some of the other dispositions of some of his planets, it doesn't surprise me at all that he would have psychic experiences or paranormal experiences. It seems to make sense in a certain kind of way.
Yeah.
Oh, Miguel makes a point that Elvis was a big fan of Chariots of the Gods.
You mean by Eric von Daniken?
Yep.
Yeah, he was very sophisticated. Again, he was ahead of the curve. We're talking 60s. He both he would speculate, as you said, without making conclusions about UFOs could be. He thought they could be ancient aliens. He could be star seeds. He thought the angels in the Bible or Ezekiel's wheels could be alien technology.
Mm-hmm.
He believed the aliens could be these beings that were using psychic forces or telepathy to stop us from destroying ourselves. So it was very broad. The kind of conversation people were not having in those days that we have here in the 21st century. So he was all over the place, and he did read books like that, Book of Enoch, Urantia, and others, and he speculated a lot on extraterrestrials. And he had 3 experiences himself.
Yeah,
What can you tell us about the experiences? I want to hear those. What you can tell us about those?
Well, it's almost like he had the full menu. One of them, when he was driving from Memphis to LA, there was a time when Elvis did not want to fly. So he would drive in these motorhomes to go do movies or record albums. And he was going through the Arizona desert, and he and the Memphis Mafia and friends saw these lights making all these strange movements across the sky at incredible speeds. They got out, and they had like your typical conversation after your jaws are not dropped anymore. And his friend is like, "Could that be experimental craft?" And Elvis is like, "No, there is nothing our military or the Reds have that can do that." And then they got into a philosophical discussion. The other one was in his mansion in Bel Air. He was out there with, I think it was Sonny West, one of his bodyguards, and they were outside just hanging out. They saw a light flood the area, and they're just staring, and suddenly they looked at each other and they're like, "Whoa, this is not a helicopter. This is not an airplane. It is right on top of us, and it's not making any sound." So the light floods everything, and Elvis tells his bodyguard, "Go get Jerry Schilling," his other bodyguard and friend. Goes in, they come out, and Elvis is gone. And they look at each other like, "Damn it, we had one job, and now we've allowed aliens to abduct our boss. The king has been abducted." So they're running around screaming, "Elvis, Elvis." And finally, they hear his voice. He's at the neighbor's yard looking at the sky, but the light was leaving. And then the third one was in Graceland, of all places. And this was your typical saucer that flew over the house. And Elvis was there with his father, Vernon. And that's what's interesting. You wonder if he was dropped off, because in some accounts, when they see the saucer, Vernon suddenly remembers the blue light over the house when he was born. Like, he was allowed to remember that occasion. And he turns around to Elvis, "I just remembered about your birth." And Elvis is like, "Oh boy, this is curious. Am I really of this world?" And he wondered. He thought, he could be an alien. He did sort of speculate. I mean, if anybody is superhuman and defied history and anything, well, that would have had to be, if we could choose one person, well, maybe Michael Jackson, I don't know, but it would be Elvis. And there's a fourth possible one. When he was out skiing at his house in Colorado, this blue meteor suddenly flashed and was flying through the sky. And again, blue is always there with Elvis. When you realize not only the alien blue light, but you realize his most popular movies, much of his songs, the way he dressed.
Blue
When
Moon of Kentucky.
Yeah. Whenever he would meditate or heal people, a blue light appeared. So when in the book, I realized there's blue everywhere. And when you look at it, UFO encounters and abductions, including Whitley Strieber, including Skinwalker Ranch, you'll see blue light is always present somewhere. It's almost like it's a characteristics. But anyway, this time it was a blue meteor, and it just crashed into the mountain and destroyed part of the mountain. And what's interesting is that everybody there, including his entourage and other figures were freaking out, and he just sat there like, no big deal, like this is part of the universe. So those were the main ones, I would say.
Miguel, just kind of, I don't, maybe I'll just stick with the, like out there kind of stuff. But you did have mentioned, Elvis moved to Memphis. You also do create the duality of the Egyptian Memphis. Okay, so uh, is that just a coincidence? Is there some kind of
There's no
similarity?
coincidences with Elvis. You're gonna have to get used to that.
Yeah. Okay, so give us a little bit of your insights into the uh, Memphi.
Well, I talked about the crossroads, right? Think of
Hmm.
that theme. That's where Robert Johnson went to get his powers from the devil. That's where Elvis seems to appear as he's changing history. That's where all of us go if we want to meet the trickster and find our new transformation. So Memphis was considered back then the crossroads between North and South America, or United States. It was a crossroads of black and white culture, of blues and jazz. I mean, this was known. And strangely enough, if you wonder in Tennessee, how come Tennessee cities and landmarks are always named after Civil War figures or Native Americans? Somehow somebody decided to name this after an Egyptian city, which means, guess what? The land between two lives. In other words, Memphis was the crossroads of ancient Egypt. And the Egyptian motif really starts to appear in a lot of Elvis's life. I mean, he was fascinated with ancient Egypt. He studied it. He wanted to get married to Ginger Alden in an Egyptian a church with a pyramid. He used to do this sort of magic incarnation where he'd do a pyramid and he'd go, Christ consciousness, come and take me. And of course, his outfits were always Egyptian. He wore an ankh most of his life, and the day he died, he's still wearing an ankh for magical protection, if you would. He knew about the Gnostics, and of course, as scholars have said, the Gnostics were an Egyptian religion originally. So you have all these Egyptian motifs. Even his death, he died at 42. 42, it's a popular number in the occultism, Thelema, and other systems. But in Egypt, when you die, you go to the afterlife, and either Osiris or Mot will be holding the scale with your heart and the feather. And then Mot or Osiris will ask you 42 negative sins. In other words, what are sins you did not commit? Like, oh, well, at least I never murdered somebody, something like that. But it was 42. And interesting enough, Elvis died when he was 42. And there's a few parallels there. But yeah, ancient Egypt is pretty much connected to Elvis as much as UFOs.
Cool. I think you did it just really fantastic job on the occult Elvis to just give us those insights that probably most people weren't aware of, but with UPRN's reach, they're aware of them now. I, I highly recommend your book for an example of being just a very insightful biography.
Thanks. Again, it was pretty much channeled. It was easy to write.
Ha- with your Gnostic books, are you writing those more based on research, life experience? It is the writing of the occult Elvis a little different from the other books you've written?
Yeah, very different. Again, I felt I was something had spoken through me, and of course, I do add. I think I was chosen, but because I did add some of my slants. Again, there is Gnosticism there, although again, as I show, Elvis had read the Gospel of Thomas, the Nag Hammadi Library. In fact, the other day, I'm going to put a blog post. I found a note Elvis wrote directly quoting a Gnostic scripture. So it's not even hearsay. In his own handwriting, he knew about the Gnostics. So I felt it was good to express some Gnostic ideas. And Elvis would agree. He believed in this cosmic Christ and the Christ within and all that and the illusionary nature of reality. He got that from Yogananda in Hinduism, but it was certainly something that ties into the Gnostics for sure. So, and there are other things. For example, I tried to explain why he fell, and as somebody who's a recovering addict, I wanted to sort of explain and see it through my eyes, make it personal, and show various theories of why Elvis couldn't. How he was caught in a trap, like Suspicious Mind says. I think Professor Wham already talked about Capricorn, how he got caught in the trap of being a Capricorn, but there's other theories too. And hopefully, if people are struggling out there, they can not do what Elvis do. I mean, I'm writing the David Bowie book, and David Bowie he was going to the same trajectory as Elvis during the same time, but Bowie was able to snap out of it and save his life when it looks like he was pretty much doomed. So there's always a way. You don't have to self-destruct. I know it's the wounded healer idea, but there is a way you can deal with your trauma and still be useful as an artist.
Miguel, you were just talking about you do write about Elvis was aware of the Book of Enoch. Growing up in like the farming community of Tupelo, kind of sounds like the schools and local libraries really aren't going to be the first stop of new translations of the Book of Enoch into English for teens to first discover about the books that didn't make it into the Bible. But you do write about when after Elvis had enlisted in the army, he is exposed to new aspects of learning. How did that period from 1958 to 60 help to get Elvis more involved in a wider exposure to different cultural ideas?
Well, we must understand that he always had psychic powers and visions. Again, he would see Jesse and premonitions. There are instances of he and his family healing people. They had the shamanistic witch blood, but his mother always told him to keep it shut. He did confess early in his career, 55, to his girlfriend, his then girlfriend, June Juanico, that he could astral travel. And it was something that he simply said his mother don't tell people. He could leave his body at will and travel the cosmos. Probably a reason he thought he was some sort of extraterrestrial. And he and June also read Khalil Gibran's The Prophet, the famous book, still popular today. And they read it sort of two lovebirds because of its beautiful poetry. But then when he got to the army, two things happened. One, his mother died when he was in basic training, which was a huge blow to him. And the other one is that he was angry because his church had turned on him. Evangelical Christianity had denounced him. Billy Graham, the famous evangelical exemplar, denounced him publicly. His own pastor turned on him, saying he was possessed by Satan. And, Elvis really, we have to remember, the status quo was not happy with him because he caused a firestorm in this country like it never seen before. He was transgressive. People were rebelling. Women were thinking independently. Oh my God, it was terrible. But he was really angry at his church denouncing him. But at the same, and he realized, this is not my thing. I don't want these churches that are businesses. He realized the idea of hellfire made no sense. And he logically came to the conclusion that reincarnation was a theological sound stance. And in the army, when he was mourning Gladys, his mother, he went back to the prophet for comfort. He started trying things like aromatherapy and so forth. So he became much more open-minded. But it really wasn't until 64 when he met his spiritual leader, Larry Geller, and later he would meet Dayamata, Yogananda's successor, that the floodgates opened, that he really began to learn about theosophy and Buddhism and Taoism and Freemasonry. And he got into Manly P. Hall and so forth, and started doing yoga and meditating and trying different sort of magic powers and so forth. So it was really the mid 60s where Elvis became a full-blown occultist who embraced his own style of Christianity.
Because that's about 10 years into his legendary career.
Yeah, around then.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, he was still what? He was 20. So he probably wasn't even 30 when it happened. Yeah, we can't forget he was only like 20 years old when he exploded into the scene. He was a kid.
And speaking of his youth at this time, give us a little background on the interaction between Elvis and the legendary Sam Phillips. You can't do a show without getting into a little bit of the Sun Studios.
Yeah, with Elvis, everything seems to be fated, right? Especially, again, Sun Studios. Elvis is seen as an Apollo figure by certain people. But yeah, it was a strange twist of fate, if we want to believe in coincidences, which I hope your audience is not doing anymore with Elvis. But we have this kid who never learned how to read music. Most people in his school and others thought he was a good-looking kid with an okay voice, but they didn't think he had any sort of talent. And he's showing up there in Sun Studios, and he wants to do a record for his mother. So he does these 2 records, and oddly enough, they're so poor at the time still that they didn't even own a record player. So why was he doing that? But he's sort of hanging out there, and then I think it was Sam Phillips who was the owner, and he was always believing in trying to make this fusion of black music and white music, but it never really succeeded. He'd had hit bands and so forth. But suddenly he wants to do a super group, like, I don't know, Asia, one of those super groups where you throw people different together. And the secretary says, what about that kid Elvis? He's got the looks. You want to have a front man, this guy's good on the eyes. So Sam Phillips puts this group together, and they start practicing and auditioning, and all day Elvis is bombing. He is bombing. He just can't do it. At the end of the day, Sam Phillips is like, let's just call it a day, goes into the next room to sort of close things down, and all of a sudden something enters Elvis. As I say, this was the devil or the trickster spirit, because Elvis suddenly starts singing this very obscure song, this rhythm and blues song, racial song called "It's All Right Mama," which was so niche, only Sam would have known it too. Why did Elvis decide to sing? And Elvis starts, and he just doesn't start singing, but he becomes Elvis. The hip moving and the hiccups and all that. Suddenly Elvis appears at the end of the night and starts singing "It's All Right Mama," and Sam Phillips is in the other room, and he suddenly turns around. This is it. This is the sound I've been looking for all my life. This is the perfect American fusion of, country, blues, gospel, everything, black, white. This is the sound I've been looking for all my life. And he signs up Elvis, and yes, "It's All Right Mama" becomes a hit. It does become a hit. Obviously, his real hit would be later when Colonel Parker took over from Sam Phillips, became his manager, and put out "Heartbreak Hotel." That's the song that turned him into a global sensation immediately. And it's strange because that song is about suicide. It's about a guy going into a hotel room because he got dumped and he's going to off himself. But that song, you might say, awoke an entire generation. What did John Lennon say when he heard "Heartbreak Hotel"? Before Elvis, there was nothing. What did Bob Dylan say when he heard "Heartbreak Hotel"? He said, "I felt once that we were all having suddenly the same dream, and it was Elvis." Jimmy Page, Robert Plant, Jimi Hendrix. That song really just changed history, not just music history, but cultural history when it came out. And again, that story just tells you, yeah, that can't be a coincidence. It's very strange. Again, and Elvis was studying to be what? He was a truck driver at the time, studying to be an electrician, which is strange because his hero was Shazam, whose logo is electricity. And then later on, Elvis's logo, taking care of business, would have the lightning bolt. So a lot of strange coincidences happening around Elvis throughout his whole life.
Okay. I'm trying to think. Miguel, is there anything else like the Stalin Jesus face in the sky you want to get into? Is there I don't want to give away the whole book, but I just you do bring up so many things that uh the UPR and listeners have always enjoyed hearing about. Did you want to say something about that? You want to get into another
Anything you
topic?
want. Anything you want. There's
I don't.
nothing.
I think that's an interesting story. Do you just want to touch on that?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, there were two times when Elvis met Larry Geller. He was at a time in his life where he felt very empty. Fame was just not doing it for him. He was rich. He was the apex predator of the entertainment world. He was doing movies and getting paid millions of dollars, but he hated his life. And his mom had passed, and he was like, "What's my purpose? There's not much else." And Larry Geller and Dayamata taught him the spiritual path. However, the problem is a few years later, Elvis was again frustrated because although he was meditating and doing yoga, he was mostly reading books. And we all know that, you can read all the books in the world about Paris, but if you don't go to Paris, it's kind of, what's the point? And he was reading, and they're driving again the motor homes from Memphis to LA. And Elvis is just very angry because he feels he's not had enough satori or enlightenment or gnosis, whatever you want to call it. And he's driving the motorhome, and he suddenly pulls over at some broken down motel. He says, "Oh, I just need to freshen up in a room for about an hour or two." He takes Larry Geller, and he's like, I don't feel it. Why am I not having, I want to see God. That's basically what he's saying. I want to have an experience of the divine. And there he gives them the old Zen Buddhist metaphor or allegory where a teacher puts a cup in front of a student and tells them to keep pouring, and suddenly the water comes out, and the student's like, "What does it mean? What are you doing?" He said, "Your cup is overflowing. You need to be empty to allow God in. A full cup is no good." And Larry tells that to Elvis. You're filling your mind with all these books. You need to empty yourself out so that something can come in. So then they drive for a while, and suddenly Elvis and Larry, they're both in the front seat, see the clouds starting to form, and they see this figure appearing, and it's not a good figure. And they stop the motorhome, and the two run out, and the rest of the bodyguards, the Memphis Mafia's like, "What is going on?" And Elvis runs into the desert, and this cloud formation turns into the face of Stalin. Now, remember, this is the 60s. If there was a image of pure evil in the 60s, it would have been Stalin, who then was considered, by then the world found out he was one of the most evil people in the world, even more than Hitler when the data starts coming in. And Elvis realized that he's kind of blown his life, that he didn't live the right way, too materialistic, too impatient and all that. And he realized that Stalin is also within him. And he feels he's dropped the ball, and he comes to a point of pure humbleness, emptiness. And he goes, "If this is evil and this evil is in me, please destroy me right now, God. Just take me off the chessboard. I screwed up. I'll wait till the next lifetime." But then the face of Stalin turns into light and goes into Elvis, and Elvis feels the presence of Jesus, and he feels the Christ within, the hope of glory, as the Apostle Paul says, and he's completely filled with a bliss he never experienced before. And it really changed him, or gave him fuel for that. He did have other mystic experiences. Obviously, enlightenment and salvation is never a straight line. There were times when he would lose it and go into materialism, but there were times when this vision kept him going and realized there is a God, there is a purpose for me, and I just have to keep fighting for it, and so forth. So this was a very important, you might say, experience for Elvis.
Well, what's the latest from your podcast, Aeon Byte? What do you have coming up?
And I hope technology works. I've been having a lot of techno, as I call them, techno archons. Those shows where nothing works. That's been my story lately. So I'm like, I'll be just grateful if we can do a full show without any burps. So a lot of rescheduling. Let's put it that way. I've got to do a lot of rescheduling.
Yeah. What's the gist of your show? I'd rather tell. It's like I'd rather have you say it than me. I think Miguel has a really good show. That's
nothing wrong with that. Give me 4 stars, man.
But
it's a AM by Gnostic Radio. It's been around for a while. I attempt to look at ancient Gnostic and Hermetic ideas and bring them and find their meaning and bring them for a modern, not just meaning, but usefulness for an audience. So that's been the goal. And because Gnosticism is so, it was such a mystic religion, there's a lot of satellite ideologies around it, like Kabbalah, even ufology. Philip K. Dick was influenced by Gnosticism. Carl Jung was. So there's a lot of the Cathars, the Sufis, all the sort of Gnostic adjacent traditions and so forth are part of the show. I've also started a new podcast, and I hope to get the guy you were talking about, Jimmy. We are talking, it's called Gen X Wasteland, and this one is a podcast that deals with more of the MTV generation with universal themes, and talk to people about those days. But also, and it also is a vehicle to promote Elvis, to promote Bowie, and kind of have some fun, because I've been talking about metaphysics for so long. It's nice to talk about music, culture, and other high weirdness.
Definitely sounds worth checking out for sure. No doubt about it. And one of my big experiences that I've had, I've seen beings of light. I was inside my house listening to the Bible on Watchword, and I study different belief systems from American Indian shamanism, the Norse to Buddhism and things like that. But I grew up Christian. But at this particular moment, I think it was about 10 or 15 years ago, had that Watchword Bible playing on my DVD player, and something told me to go outside and look towards the house. And it was just like a thought. So I went outside and looked towards the house, and I saw two people made of light leave my house as if they were in it, flew out through the roof and into the heavens. And I was completely sober, and I've seen things under other guises of consciousness, but that particular time I was not on anything, not weed or anything. And I'm kind of curious. I don't know a lot about Gnosticism, but is there a lot of things that come up with like light bodies and beings of light? I've had shamanism. Zach Berry say that the dead can travel in balls of light. And then I had a guy, Don Oscar, say that down in South America, they watch these beings of light in the heavens and like have little weird parties, and they may be tripping. I don't know if they are, no big deal to me, but I'm just kind of curious. Is that something that's come up a lot? I'm always trying to gather info since I saw it, because I'm like trying to, maybe it was my dad. I don't know what it was, but has the light body come up in Gnosticism a lot?
Well, it comes up with the idea of you wearing a light body if you're going to go astral travel, because the Gnostics are the inheritors of the Egyptian mysteries. They just clothed it in sort of a Christian ideology, but it is Egyptian, and one of their main features is the idea of clothing yourself in light bodies or astral bodies, and that way you can travel the afterlife or the astral plane and hopefully not get attacked by a snake or archon and all that. I mean, there are instances of visitations, but the Gnostics in those days would have called them angels. That was their term, or archons. Those were the two, the good and the bad in their mythology. So that's I mean, yeah, I mean, they talk about the heavenly realm being sort of a watery light. They love the watery light motif. It's very important to them.
So how much did what the Eastern practices that played into Elvis's life? There was a show I just saw on HBO Max, Legends of Shiva, with yeah, that's it, with Amish, and they went to India and got into all their cosmology and the architecture and the gods. It was really good. But did that belief system play into Elvis a lot?
Hell yeah. I mean, again, he became a disciple of Yogananda, and Dayamata was Yogananda's successor. So he embraced that sort of mystic Hinduism, and he certainly embraced Buddhism. I have in the book him quoting the Taoist poetry and all that. So it was important. Yoga, meditation, all such of other sorts of exercises that he would try, and so forth. Yeah, and he was, of course, he loved the idea. You know, Yogananda's famous story is that when he passed, his body did not decay for weeks. Now, I'm hearing, of course, from people that Elvis's body did not decay for days when he was after he died. But I have to look deeper into that. Again, there's so many. Elvis is a living mythology that changes, and there's so many. It's a multiplicity of angles.
There's some weird like Buddhist monk stories like that where their bodies stayed behind and did weird stuff, and they like went to their light bodies. I saw it in some article. Like there's some weird stuff like that.
Miguel does pose. Was he beamed up?
Yeah, it's possible. I try to give different angles, and the UFO angle might be one of them. There is hints, there's evidence. One time he did tell this super fan, her name was Wanda June Hill. He told her, I'm from the ninth moon of Jupiter, and she said that his eyes started glowing and his face was made of light and all that. Now, whether she's making it up, this is one of the few instances where everything in the book I try to make sure there's a lot of eyewitnesses. This is the one I let it slide. So, but again, I'll let the reader decide for that one. But again, Elvis had no problem if that was with all these theories, and one of those theories was true, like him being some sort of alien being who forgot, he would have been perfectly fine with that.
Well, you also bring up uh, examples of healing and laying on of hands that were uh, witnessed by multiple people. So, you're one example of, just one source. Okay, things like that happen. Oh, but you have other examples of multiple eyewitnesses of Elvis healing, stopping the car and getting out of the street and helping a stranger.
Yeah, he was a kind person, and he did have the ability to heal. I give lots of examples. That wasn't a problem because he was raised as a Pentecostal, so faith healing was one of the few times where that form of magic is accepted. But and he did develop it, especially when he got into the occult, and he could incorporate like theosophy from Alice Bailey and other and Hindu Buddhist healers and all that. So, but I mean, Priscilla herself says that whenever she had a headache, Elvis would touch her head, boom, the headache would disappear. Or his grandmother, Minnie May, said that he cured her arthritis of many decades. Over and over, he's healing people. And some of them were extreme, like healing broken legs, healing cancer. And like the example you said, Elvis is driving in his limo, or he's in his limo and he sees this bus over the curb, and he sees a bus driver staggering outside with his hand on his chest. And then Elvis gets out of his car and he runs to it and he puts his arm around the guy. And he says, and the guy looks up, of course, is like, what the hell is Elvis doing here? But Elvis puts his hand on his chest and does this blue light meditation, and the phone keeps ringing, and he heals the guy's heart attack. And he waits for the hospital to, for the ambulance to come. He sits there and the guy's fine, no heart attack or anything. So I give plenty of instances of that in the book.
And it's at a concert, 20,000 eyewitnesses. I mean, it's there on videotape on some of the shows as well. So it's apparent to people of his powers.
Yeah, I lost you. Okay, I'm back. I lost you. I missed what you were saying.
I don't know if I can remember that far.
His powers. His power.
Just with 20,000 people in a venue, there are multiple eyewitnesses.
Yeah, he was a faith healer. A
A
shaman. Simple as that.
Yeah.
And it's not even your body healing. Yeah, there are instances he saved people's life who were sick, who wanted to commit suicide. He healed them psychologically, gave them hope. But yeah, I mean, he was again a true shaman.
And what do you mean by a sorcerer? I mean, that's a little different than a shaman, obviously. Of course, my knowledge of that is sword and sorcery movies. That's about it. That's the only.
He had supernatural telekinetic powers, and again, this was always with witnesses. He could make bushes shake. He could control the weather, make it stop raining, or make clouds move across the sky. He could create these weird force fields that could stop people. He had the ability often to read their minds and know what they were going to say before they said them. So that's when I kind of say magic, because a shaman not doesn't necessarily perform supernatural feats in these traditions. It's medicine, healing, and voyaging into the spirit world. But again, you were kind of, splitting hairs, right? I mean,
and what kind of got you into some of these fringe topics? Did you have any experiences on your own of anything weird?
I've always been interested, or like Elvis, looking for the higher questions in life. trying to find out what's behind the veil, trying to understand, the nature of reality. So I've always been on a quest, and I go wherever the interesting stories are, the mythologies, the data. And I've had a few experiences myself. I've had 2 UFO experiences and a few mystic experience. But even, I mean, what's a mystic experience? I mean, sometimes you're sitting there looking at the sunset and you feel this force move within you. That's a mystic experience, or creating something beautiful, or you look at your children and they're smiling and you feel like the presence of God. It depends, but I
Uh-oh, he froze. The aliens froze him. Hopefully he'll come back.
He's
But definitely
cryogenically frozen.
like Han Solo. But a good interview. Definitely cool.
Yeah, I'm glad Inner Traditions contacted you about having Miguel as a guest. I've enjoyed working with him over the years, and I'm very appreciative that you asked me to join tonight's show.
Yeah, you're good with the music questions more than I am. I'm usually too stoned for the music questions. I can do some of them, but definitely a good one. Hopefully he comes back, or we'll just write him or whatever. But I know, Wham, I sent you a book today. Hopefully you can unzip it. I'm sure you got an unzipper thingy, right, on your computer. It is, we got a whole woman show coming up July 25th. I think it's like psychedelics and lucid dreaming. 2 women authors and you and moi. But I sent you the info and it's zipped up. So if you need me to send it separately, let me know. But he froze. I feel frozen too.
Oh, it was just about a 2-hour show, anyways. And
yeah.
You want to wrap there? That's fine.
5 minutes.
Okay.
We got 5 minutes. But next week is Robert Geronimo, and no, he's not related to the Native American dude. He's got Cuban connections. I already asked, and he told me the the facts about that. No, he did Blood Realm, a comic from Alterna. And he's with the company that Peter was with last week, but he's also like a teacher and on mythology and stuff, and so he can get into stuff like that. But let me see what else is coming up. We got 5 minutes. Anthony Fusilla, that's secret space stuff. Maximum Furyk, that's the Bigfoot stuff. David J. Brown and Sarah Huntley, that's DMT. We're gonna do some DMT, I wish. June 6th, Clay Adams, that's Fried Comics. Kevin Laporte, Inverse Press. Wild Trees, Joseph Schmalk. I have trouble with his name. He's coming on as a famous Arthur dude. And then Nisha and Norma. I need to put their last names on that. That's in July. So I need to get some of my star guests on, some of my star effort guests. I got to dig deep. Mark's been helping with guests. Our scheduling was weird too. It's finally kind of evened out. Oh, Carter Bouchard did Coast to Coast recently with Connie Willis. That was pretty cool. I haven't listened to it, but he got the Coast to Coast gig. Carter Bouchard did with Connie. I don't know if it's online for me to listen to, but I'll have to check it out. I don't even know if they put theirs up for free or whatever. Probably not. Bigelow charges. But anyway, no, I feel like someone beat the crap out of me. I just feel tired. But it was a good show. Thanks, Wham. Thanks, Mark. And I don't know,
Thank you.
It's definitely Man in the High Castle. That's the vibe in the air. Which I don't know that whole story. I just know it's like some alternate verse where Nazis win. That's pretty much what it feels like. Something just feels weird, off. I know I saw some article. They're saying the Earth's about to turn 90% and do a flip. So,
well, everything does feel kind of off, and I think that's just because everything is off.
Feels like crap. But everybody, go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, Miguel just contacted me and said his computer did crash, so it's not like
He's cool.
we offended him and he hung
I
up or
know.
something. There's obviously the viewers could see something happened, and he's having a tech issue, and with this the storms coming out the Gulf Coast, making its way across the
Where's my Michael Carter?
across the East Coast. I'm sure Michael would want to be a guest, but
Oh.
I've heard people talking about the electrical disruptions that they've had because of these really powerful storms. Maybe Miguel was impacted, but
Yeah,
he's not being
we know it's
yeah
good. It's cool. It's
yeah
cool. It was almost over anyway. So I mean,
yeah.
everybody check out his book, The Occult Elvis, and it's on Amazon, and it's really good and unique. He did a really good job. I don't think there's much else out there like it.
No,
For
it's
sure.
it really is a well done book.
Oh. Okay, hold on. Hey Miguel, good to see you back. We only got a couple of minutes, but you want to give us your link and everything? I know you got some tech problems.
Yeah. Since Mark got that phone call, my computer got all wonky, and it finally just must
Mark,
be the U.S. government sending
yeah,
waves or something. They don't want Elvis out.
Mark spook friends.
Yeah, exactly.
Government
Friends in high places. No,
signal.
for everything, including the Elvis book, my podcast, AM Bite, the new podcast, Gen X Wasteland, social media. I have a new site. It's simple. It's called just MiguelConnor.com. Just my name.com. That's it.
What's that shield back there of? Is that like Mayan or Aztec?
It's an Aztec calendar, yeah.
Okay, cool.
Elvis was very much into Mayan mythology too, but yeah, that I got actually at the pyramids in Mexico, the Sun Pyramid.
Awesome. Very cool. Well, man, we loved it. We appreciate it, and keep us in the loop on the David Bowie for sure. We'll Capricorn it up again, and we appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Take care.
Have a good night. All right. All right. Take care, everybody. Good night.
Guys.
Good night.
All righty. That was a good one.
Yeah. Thanks for inviting me.
Let me end this thing. All right.